Hello everyone and welcome to ZP Productions, and today I'll be reviewing, as I promised last week, the Tamron 35-150mm f2 to f2.8 lens. And today my review will focus on autofocus and image quality, mainly image quality because autofocus is a very small section of portrait photography, and I'll be focusing on photography in terms of portraiture wise. So if you are looking at other forms of photography, I would say as I don't cover in this particular review here, but if you are looking at this lens, and a lot of people will be looking at this lens, high chance you also be a portrait photographer because this focal range is just fantastic for it. Now, without wasting time, let's take a look at this lens here. And before I start, I'd like to thank Class Distribution in Singapore for loaning me this copy of the lens. You can support them by buying from the local retailer. And this review, there is no money transacted. They just passed me the lens. I had fun with it, and I bring you this particular review here. And I'm going to return it like tomorrow or day after. So I have a very short time with it over the weekends, and I did 5 photo shoots with it. And out of these 5, 3 were collaboration shoots, which I will cover today, and the other 2 were commission shoots. So I will talk about some of it because they were indoors and had some experience with them. But I couldn't show you photos from those shoots till it's released officially in the near future itself. Now that said, let's talk about this lens, right? Now this lens, firstly, the whole setup is not very light. This is 2 kg, as you can see in the photo here. And the lens alone is 1.2 kg. So don't expect it to be a really light setup that you can handhold in one hand for 8 hours. No, this is not the lens for you. If you are looking to use this lens, just prepare yourself that this will get tiring. And if you're using it for prolonged hours, you may want to find a way to put on this lens often. But if you're using it for a 1 hour portraiture, I don't think there is any issue here. So that is pretty much it. The rest of it, take a look at my box opening video, which will cover all the physical aspect of this lens itself. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is autofocus. And autofocus, I would say, it is pretty quick, as you can see in this video here. From close to mid-range, which is what it matters for portraiture itself, pretty quick. Really, really nice, really, really fast. And it's on general, very accurate too. As you can see in some of my beach shots in my other video, once again, the link is up somewhere here, I will tell you that I shoot most of those shots without looking at the viewfinder or the LCD. I just have a rough gauge on how it looks like because a lot of the shots are shot at knee level, and the Sony A1 could not flip the portrait way, and the day was very bright, so I only have a rough framing. Everything else, I have to trust IAF on the camera itself. So I'll tell you that this autofocus system in good light is reliable and it is decently fast. Now, in very low light, however, I would say it's not really quick, but I don't think this is the lens issue. I think it's the Sony camera. I don't have that much experience with it, but when I was shooting in a studio in low light, I would say as continuous AF is just not my cup of tea. It induces a lot of wobble and softness when you use it. So I usually use single shot AF because, when you shoot at lower shutter speed, the continuous AF will mess with your sharpness big time. So in single shot, Sony cameras are just not fast at all. So pretty much, I don't think a lens is the issue here. It's probably the way Sony do their single AF itself. Now, I don't have any other experience in terms of autofocus because I have limited time. Mainly, I do portraiture. So let's talk about image quality here. Now, in terms of image quality, let's look at the synthetic one first. Synthetic one, let's look at the daytime. I shot a few focal ranges for this particular lens in my daylight test. I did 35mm, 150mm, and somewhere in between. Now, for this video, I only cover the 2 ends, and I only cover it briefly because you can just take a look in the samples I provide and then make a decision yourself. Because if I was to describe the entire process and everything, it would be a long-winded talk. But in summary, I would say as 35mm, it is sharp in the center, sharp off-center, decently sharp close to the edge, and a little bit soft at the corners. While for 150mm, I would say it's sharp in the center, sharp off-center, a little bit softer at the areas closer to the edge. Very similar performance to the 35mm, just that I feel that 35mm is a little bit more consistent, but the 150mm is very sharp in the center on focus. But that being said, this lens don't seem to be flat in terms of its focal plane. As such, refocusing at the corner does improve your sharpness a little. As I said once again, samples are in the description and it covers this section and the next one too, which is on the night scene of this shot to test the various aberrations. Now, when I look at the night shots itself, I would say as in terms of chromatic aberration, it is very low. Look at the fluorescent tubes. Some chromatic aberrations, but nothing too significant itself. Now, there is a little bit of hazing and glowing for those fluorescent tube. And if you look at the later shots, I will talk about it in my actual shoot itself, this lens do exhibit certain amount of flare. And then when I look at the edge itself, there is some chroma, some weird odd shades in the light. Not too big deal, but it is there itself. Somebody did ask for Sunstar, so I did a shot at f16 for 35mm and f18 at 150mm, and you can see the Sunstar here. Now, I'm no landscape expert and I don't shoot at f16 often, so I do not know whether this is a good Sunstar or a bad Sunstar itself. Now, for this particular night scene, I also did a totally out of focus shot, and you can see there is a little bit of onion ringing, but if not, the focus, I'll say as the bokeh itself on general is quite round, and if you shoot at f16, you'll get a bit of hexagonal shape as usual. You know, there is some amount of blades in this lens itself. It's not a totally round blade, right? Okay, and that's about it for synthetic test. It's quite boring, so let's talk about real world photo shoot itself. With this lens, I did 5 different photo shoots, and out of these 5, 3 were collaborations, so I can show you photos here, and 2 were commission shoots, and they are not published yet, so I can't talk about them yet. So let's talk about the 3 shoots that I did in collaboration. First one was with Mickey, and this was done at a beach. As I said, most of the time the focus of the shot itself is done by the camera and the lens. I have no idea what's getting focused because I couldn't see what's getting focused. Most of the time the shots were done at knee level or lower, and because the beach had a slope and then the end area there, so this slope makes it even harder. So if I shoot at knee level, it's only slightly above the knee level for the subject itself, and if I shoot at feet level, it's just the knee level of the subject itself. So it's quite irritating. A lot of time I couldn't see what I'm exactly shooting, especially at the beach. It's so bright. I only know rough framing and roughly whether the focusing box is on the eye or not. But I tell you that the focus is reliable in that shoot. I did not have any out of focus shot in that shoot itself, as long as IAF show roughly is in the area. And in terms of sharpness across the various focal ranges, in that particular shoot it is very good. I shot 35 all the way to 120mm. I didn't shoot at 150mm for this particular shoot here. And I'll tell you that none of the shot disappointed me in terms of sharpness itself. Now, this lens for this particular beach shoot was very handy because I use 35mm often in beach shoots because I want to capture the sky, the sea, and the environment. It's so beautiful. And this lens allows me to shoot at 35 f2 to maintain a little bit of separation, and allows me to shoot at 120mm if I just want to focus on the subject itself. So I would say as this lens is very valuable if you're shooting at the beach. And the best thing, this lens is all-in-one, so you don't need to change the lens in the middle of the shoot, which is very dangerous in the beach because if any sand gets into your camera, it will destroy a shutter or two. And that's it, for the beach shoot. And in the next shoot with Joy Su, she was cosplaying Sucrose and we did an indoor shoot. And in this particular shot itself, you can see that there is flare. And because the background is very bright, there is some chromatic aberration. But let me zoom in on some areas with chromatic aberration, and it is very minimal. Don't forget, I have already edited the shot, I have already pushed it. I did not apply any chromatic aberration correction. I can tell you that the chromatic aberration is very little considering what I've done with the shot, and considering that it is backlit itself. So the chromatic aberration performance of this lens is good. The flaring performance, not so great because you will lose significant contrast and sharpness. Now, in this particular shoot here, I shot with 35mm all the way to 150mm in various angles, and I really love it. For the indoor shots, I did a lot of wider angles, and you can see in these shots, it's very, very nice. Then I did some shots out of that particular room itself in the corridors, and I can show you 150mm f2.8, and this is where you can see the bokeh itself. I would say as the bokeh is not the smoothest bokeh in the world, it has some texture, but it's not distracting. So overall, I do think that the bokeh is pretty okay. Now, if you zoom in at the bokeh, you can see a little bit of the ringing in the bokeh. So this is where the texture is coming from. It is not perfectly smooth. And when I zoom out a little bit at about 80+ millimeters, you can see that there is still decent good amount of bokeh at f2.8, and the bokeh is still same, a bit textured, a little bit of the outer rings that you can see here that's causing the texture itself, which isn't a big deal because on general it's still quite smooth. Now, if I zoom out all the way to 35mm, this is where you will see the bokeh becomes a little bit busy at the corner there. There is not much bokeh in anywhere else in the frame to actually talk about, but you can see it is a little bit busy there. But then again, 35 f2 to start with do not have much bokeh, and if you really want bokeh out of 35mm lens, you need to really get the 1.4 version themselves. And then the last shoot I did was in the studio, and this is with Robin. And this particular shoot is a crown shoot that I do quite often. I shot at f5.6 and f8, and I would say there's nothing special to talk about because it's a studio shoot, and f5.6 is just really sharp. I mean, I can't show you the raw itself, but I can zoom in on the eye and just show you a screenshot. I can tell you that it is very sharp. Every single pore and texture on the person's face can be seen. So overall, if you do stop down this lens, expect it to be as good as any other lens at f5.6 and f8. So pretty nice performance here. But other than that, I want to talk about the autofocus in this particular shoot. I would say as in this particular shoot here, I have to off all the lights so that I can see the modeling light, because that is very important if I'm using a spot projector. I would say as this camera and lens combination usually have some issues focusing on those shots itself, but I don't think it's the lens problem, it's more of how the Sony camera works. It usually get thrown off a little bit, and AFC doesn't work in this case. AFS is not very reliable unless you do a double zoom in and then focus on the point, which is okay, I get used to it. So I don't think the lens has any issue in focusing. I think it's the way Sony actually does the focusing in very low light and in very small apertures themselves, like 5.6 or f8. In terms of the video parameters, I will take a look at the parfocal and focus breathing. And in terms of parfocal, it is relatively parfocal. I tried focusing on the chair at 150mm. I focus it, then after that I zoom out all the way to 35mm, punch in to look at the magnification, and it seems to be still in focus. So it is relatively parfocal. Next, I also take a look at focus breathing, and at 35mm, it seems to breathe a little bit. As you can see, the lines are shifting a little bit, but it is quite manageable if you ask me. And at 150mm, it's also the same. The chair outline seems to grow just a little bit when you are changing the, I'll say as the focus itself. So overall, I think that in terms of focus breathing, this lens does it pretty good too. And as such, if you ask me from the video point of view, this lens is pretty outstanding in terms of its video performance. And with that, I come to my final thoughts of this lens. Now, this lens, I would say, as it's heavy. It is 1.2 kg, just the lens alone. Heavier than modern 70-200s. And it is quite costly. 2,688 Sing dollars or 1,899 USD, making it one of the more expensive third-party lenses. However, the benefits it gives are significant. Firstly, wide open. At 35mm is a f2. That is a prime light equivalence. Now, the center regions are not that impressive. However, at the long end, 150mm f2.8 is pretty much very, very good. I mean, the only two lenses that will produce a more, I would say, it's more bokeh-licious setup, which is a 200mm f2, which costs a lot more and weighs a lot more. And then there's the 135mm f1.8. And if you buy first-party version of that lens, it costs almost the same as this lens, just the lens alone. Now, both of these lenses, of course, do produce you, I would say, a smoother bokeh, more separation. But, you know, they are single focal lens, and they are not cheap. As such, if you ask me, this lens is truly convenient. I mean, for my few shoots that I use it, I kind of use it all the way from 35 to 150mm. And if you look at my beach shoot where changing lens is not advisable, this lens is totally the best thing you can do out there. One lens to really shoot all the way from the start to end of the shoot at any focal length you need for portraiture. So, if you ask me, who is this lens for? Definitely for portraiture. If you are the type that shoot in adverse condition, even more recommended. If you are the type that shoot in studio, definitely very recommended. In fact, this is even more recommended to me than the 70-200 because in the studio, you can shoot at 40-something mm, depends on what you're trying to do, 40-something mm, 50-something mm, all the way to 150 mm. Between 150 to 200 mm, I think it's a personal decision. But I can really see myself shooting at 40 plus mm in the studio because if I want full body or I want certain dramatic movements in the studio, this lens still can provide to a certain extent. As such, as a studio photographer, I definitely highly recommend this lens too. So, this lens, am I going to get it? I'm definitely going to get it the moment travel restrictions are lifted and I get to travel more. I would say as today in Singapore, I am okay with changing lenses out there, but once I travel, I just want one lens, and I can see this lens as really the best thing you can do. I mean, you just need to protect one lens, carry one lens around, shoot with one lens, and don't bother with anything else. And 35 to 150 is so flexible. You can use it for streets, you can use it for portraiture, you can use it for landscape. Really, all in one lens, and 4x zoom really is a big deal if you ask me. And that's about it for today. I really enjoyed this particular lens here and highly recommend you try it out. And if you like what I do so far, do like and subscribe. And till my next review, bye bye.